Ooh, I think I had two audio streams going at once. Everything broke at the last moment. For the folks who were waiting there, I said yes. This is live. Um, Once I get my cam working, that's why I'm now surrounded by all my like fallback position bits in case that didn't work. Because I opened OBS and suddenly there was no cam, and I don't know why. So anyway, now there's a cam because I had to remove it and add it back in again, and that added an audio device as well, which I've got muted. So I think we're okay. Tell me if anything sounds or looks terrible. I think we're good. Where are we? Friday, 7 a.m. So it is tomorrow in the future for many of you. Thank you for joining. G'day, Joe. Well, I see you, Joe. It's Oxford, wasn't it? Earlier this year on another travel. Next week, speaking of travel, is going to be, in fact, there's two things next week, speaking of travel, just in case you're in Sydney. Next week, I am speaking at the SSW user group in Neutral Bay, which is kind of cool. So that is actually the first place I ever did a public talk run by my good friend Adam Kogan. So I'm going to be at SSW. Our son Ari, almost 16, is doing a week of work experience during his school holidays. That's what I do to the kids for holidays. Send them to work, learn something useful. So he's going to be there doing, I guess, whatever Adam wants him to do. Doing some bidding, Adam's bidding around writing some software or doing some testing. Or I don't know, but like actually learning what it's like to be in an office. And as I say this, I remember how long it's been since I've been in an office, which is great. It's really nice. Anyway, so we'll be there. I'll be doing a talk on Wednesday for the SSW user group. So that will be great. I will be coming back a little bit late to do this video next week. So we're going to push this back about 24 hours. And then we'll do it. And then I've got until pretty much 1 month before we go back to Europe again. I'm just finally locking in the last little bits there. When is that? That's in 31 days from now. There you go, 1 month. So we'll be back in Norway along with Stefan doing our regular team offsite, all three of us. And in the Netherlands doing a talk in The Hague. And that is there, the Europol Intercop event, that is there on my upcoming events. If you're in the law enforcement space and are able to get yourself into that one, that would be good. I've got some good ideas about what I'm going to do on that. I'm going to share some more of them and write some blog posts in advance. In the interim, brand new sponsor this week I want to talk about. It's a sponsor I've been using because they've actually got a pretty cool service. So I'm going to read the byline and then I'm going to give you my own personal opinion on what I've seen this week, over the last week. Oh dear. Like that's actually the company name. Oh dear. Oh dear. All-in-one website monitoring with security alerts for DNS and certificate changes, 10-day free trial. Keep your sites secure. Now, Oh dear does a bunch of monitoring stuff. And when they first reached out, they said, look, would you like to give it a go? And normally every sponsor often says this. And there's a bunch of stuff which is either parallel to things that I'm already doing, or if it's in the case of the likes of 1Password, well, I've been using it for ages anyway. Oh dear, I hadn't used, and I was like, where's a good fit? And I'm going to share an exclusive here. Incidentally, we don't script any of this. I literally have that line of text and then I wing it from there. Now, I'm just going to put this into my address bar and make sure I've got that right. And I'm going to copy and paste it. One of the things Oh dear does is status pages. So I've just dropped into the chat. This has honestly been on our backlog for a very long time to do an independent status page for Have I Been Pwned. So now at status.haveibeenpwned.com, you'll see we've got our first cut of a status page there. We've got the status of the API, both the Pwned Passwords API and the Have I Been Pwned API, and the status of the websites. And we've got so far 100% uptime and little green bars on every single day, and the ability to track and report on incidents. And really the value proposition for us, which really sells the value proposition this week's sponsor, is having an independent service that can watch our service and then say, look, these are the things that hopefully are working, or in the cases of not working, letting us know about that as well. Now, again, this is unscripted, but my own experience with this, I set all of this up. Steph and I set all this up. When was it? A week ago, 10 days ago, something like that. I pushed a change this week, which I haven't spoken about yet. And it broke some stuff. I'm going to show you what the change is because I'm actually pretty happy with it. Let's take this French data breach we're going to talk about later on. So this is Cultura. Now we have Open Graph images. I'm going to grab this one just here and make sure that link is right. So typically when you share a page on social media and you get the preview, that can be shown via an OG tag in the markup, normally in the HTML. And I had this one static image, which was the same OG image for every single page. So every single page would have like just the Have I Been Pwned logo. And when I was sharing pages with data breaches, you'd have this same logo, and like the preview of the data breach page was just the Have I Been Pwned logo, which doesn't tell you much. Now, I always liked the way GitHub did it. I am coming back to, oh dear, there's a story here. When you share a repo, a GitHub repo, and you share it on social, the OG image, the Open Graph preview image, has information about the repository. I think it was things like the number of commits or the number of people involved in it or something like that, and the name of it. And it's just an image. So clearly they're doing image generation on the fly. I was like, I want to do that with Have I Been Pwned. So I went to ChatGPT, I started there, got the code, obviously went and understood it and wrote a bunch of it myself as well. And then finally, if you have a look at the link I just shared, we now have OG images like this one I just posted in the chat. This is the Cultura data breach. We have a summary. I think I limited it to about 25 words. So it says, in September 2024, French retailer Cultura, we'll talk about them in a moment, was the victim of a cyber attack they attributed to an external IT service provider. The resultant data breach included almost 1.5 million unique email, and then it stops there because it could be too long. And then we've got the count, and we've got the date, and we've got the Have I Been Pwned logo and the Cultura logo. And if you see this as a preview image on social, you've actually got a good idea of what's happened. So I really like this. And I pushed it out and I tested it because I'm a responsible dev. And then Oh Dear sent me an email that started with Oh Dear, which didn't sound good. Because it wasn't good, because I'd broken something. And what I'd broken is the method that I was calling to get the data breach information was not returning any sensitive data breaches. And it just so happened that I had pushed this out right at the time that I had published the Free Ones, which is the adult website forum, Free Ones data breach. So the most recent data breach was actually breaking the OG image. And I had thought, when I didn't see it rendering properly, unlike Facebook, I thought it's because that image rendering takes a little bit longer. Maybe that request was timing out. Facebook was giving us... No, Oh Dear told me what it was. So I was able to then go and fix that. And then Oh Dear came back and said, I think it still started with Oh Dear, but it was like, hey, you've fixed the thing. So that is a long way, a roundabout way of talking about how this week's sponsor did something that was actually genuinely useful. And we're going to work more on that status page and get more information in there. It is one of the questions that comes up many, many, many times about do we have a status page? Do we have historical data about availability? Do we have SLAs? Is a different issue. But big thanks to Oh Dear, this week's sponsor. I hope they get some love from that because they did help me probably save quite a bit of time in terms of troubleshooting and figuring out what that bug was. Okay, moving on. What did I put on this week? Where are we? What day is it? Oh yeah, demos. So for the longest time, I have wanted to actually have some demos on Have I Been Pwned, like demo videos. Now, for a bit of context, Have I Been Pwned for the most part is simple, right? You whack your email address on the front page, press go or whatever we call it, and you get a result back. And there's an API and it's well documented. But we get questions all the time that, how do I say this nicely? seem like they should be obvious, or rather, seem like the answer should be obvious. Now, having said that, I appreciate that when you live and breathe something day in and day out, there's a little bit of not seeing woods for the trees sort of stuff. And things that might seem very obvious to us may not seem very obvious to other people. Having said that, some of the questions. Anyway, so I wanted to get some demos out there, some demo videos. And I'll give you a good example, and I haven't done this one yet, but this is a good example of one of the questions people ask. They say, I'm running a domain search. The domain search comes back and it lists every email address on the domain, every alias on the domain, which has been breached. And then it lists just the name of the breach after that. Cultura, for example, free ones. Just the name. How do I get the other data? It's like, well, there's a separate API which gets that. We don't return it in the API for the data breach, or rather for the domain search, because if you've got 10,000 people on it and most of them have been in the same things, well, then we get massive redundancy if we return. But there's another API. You can go and query that, and then you can just join your results. So one of the next demos I'll do is going to be around that, doing one query to get a list of all the breaches. There's 900 something, keeping that somewhere in memory, doing the domain search, and then just joining it up and seeing all your data. It's not hard. You just got to kind of mentally join the dots. So that's the thinking with the demos. Now, last week after recording or doing the live stream on Friday, we did the first demo, which is domains. Now, in launching the domain searches, in launching these demos, we've also implemented something else that's been very, very long requested, which is domains that anybody can add and test with, and also keys that anyone can use for free without having to go and get a subscription of any kind. Let's talk about the domain stuff first, then we'll talk about the keys. So we have, let me make sure I get my terminology right here. Incidentally, right back up here in the chat list from Shushinter, number 2 Crown, you said you had a question on, I shot your question on Blue Sky. I was trying to look at Blue Sky. I'll have a look at that in just a moment. You can chuck it here in the chat too if you like. So, domains. Now, we have, it's actually on the API page, we have test accounts. So Have I Been Pwned is preloaded with a bunch of data to test various scenarios. And they're all loaded against a domain that is hibp-integration-test.com. So we have, for example, an alias of account-exists, and that returns one breach and one paste. So this is all documented on the API page. We then have another alias, which is multiple breaches, and that returns 3 breaches. So if you want to test any of these particular things, you can query whether it be the API or the front page of the website for any of these email addresses, and you will see exactly what's in the description. This helps people write integration tests and things like that. Stealer-log returns a single Stealer log breach and also contains a single domain that has appeared against the address in a Stealer log. So there are all these different sorts of scenarios, and they're all on this HIBP integration test domain. Now, a change we made last week as part of pushing out the demos is that normally if you want to add a domain to your dashboard, you've got to prove you can control it. So if you want to add troyhunt.com, you've got to be able to get an email to security@troyhunt.com or add a DNS entry onto the domain or things like that. But if you add hibp-integration-test.com, there's no verification. So anybody can now add that domain and see how it works. If there is ever an email address in a breach on that domain, which is really going to mess with my integration test, you can get a notification for it. It literally sits in there just like any other domain. We're just skipping the verification step. So the long story short with this is that now anybody can go and see how the domain search feature works. They can add a domain, they can run the searches. Fantastic. That is the first demo. That went out on Friday. And then a couple of days ago, I did a demo. And incidentally, each one of these are 5 to 7 minute videos. I'm going to keep them all pretty short. So each one of these demos has a YouTube video. There is a demos link now on the Have I Been Pwned website, and when you go to demos, you will see domain search and the breached account API. So the breached account API, many people use that. I looked the other day, we'd done about 300 million requests, I think, in the last month to that API. That includes a bunch of requests which are either 401 or 429 because people have got keys that have expired or they're hammering the rate limit. But amongst those ones that went through, they either come back with a 200 because they've found an email address in data breaches in the datas, or they come back with 404 because that email just hasn't been breached before. So that's all good. The demo then walks through what is HTTP 429, how do you avoid having 429s, what else is in there, the standard response codes, of which 429 is one. Obviously the fact that just GET requests, encoding the @ symbol in the email address. Like basic stuff, but again, just the sort of stuff where we get questions, we get too many questions. Now part of this, and I'm interested in people's feedback as well, is that as I start doing more stuff with APIs, I've got to do it in some sort of coding language. For the breached account API demo, I just did curl. And I did curl because curl is pretty universal. And it's a single command line. It's about the simplest possible way you can demonstrate orchestrating HTTP request. When I get to the examples where you're doing domain searches and then you want to join it up with the list of breaches and I guess do something a bit more intelligent, I think I'm just going to do it in C# in Visual Studio Code. I think that's the most familiar way to me, the most easy way to demonstrate it. And then if you want to do it in Python or something else like that, you should be able to look at this and go, okay, I understand the logic of this. You can probably also just copy and paste that code, chuck it into ChatGPT and go Pythonize sort of thing, Pythonize it, and you'll be fine. Stefan's here. Okay, Stefan. We do have a bit of a backlog of other demos that I'm going to do, but I'd really like to hear from other people what they want to see. So if you want to see a demo on something particular, you're like, how do I do this with Have I Been Pwned? Let me know. And if you've not done it already, because this is what people do when they have a YouTube channel, go and like it and subscribe it and everything else, and that will hopefully help bump it up a little bit. I only created this channel last week, but I noticed that when I searched for it, when I searched for Have I Been Pwned, it's like, cool, there's a lot of stuff out there, but this wasn't coming up towards the top. So we need to establish some history for this channel. Actually, to that effect, let me drop it here in the chat. And if you've not already, please go and pump the buttons on that one. All right, so let's have a look. Shashinta started using the API of my own WordPress site recently and wondering if it's safe. Yes. The read-only part without authentication. What do you think? The read-only part without authentication. Can you expand on that question? So first of all, define what safe is, because I think people imply something with it. So do you mean, do we then resell the email addresses or store them or do something like that? Or do you mean safe from interception on the transport layer? Just clarify that question. And also what you mean by read-only part without authentication. Expand on that here. We'll get you an answer. Aaron, Troy, hey Troy, how much does HRBP cost to run? Is it manageable for most people to develop a platform on a moderate salary? Well, that's a big question. Let's start from the beginning. When I first built it, nearly 12 years ago now, December will be 12 years, and I wrote extensively about all the architecture and all the costs. The cost was, I used to quote it, about a cup of coffee a day. Now, coffee was cheaper 12 years ago too. So it would have been, I think it was like $100-something a month. Like it was not much money. And that was Australian dollars too. That's even less in American. And that was great. And one of the things that made it really cheap is all of the data was sitting in Azure Table Storage. And table storage scaled to the moon. Even as we moved off it last year, think it was last year, wasn't it, Stefan? It was still, from a scalability perspective, fine. It didn't have all of the redundancy and point in time restore and ad hoc queryability and all the other stuff we needed, but it was good from that perspective. And even then, it was not costing as much money with well over 10 billion records in it and huge amounts of traffic. So table storage was awesome. Azure App Service was awesome. That scaled to the moon. What else? Where was the other costs? I think they were the main things, Azure Functions, etc. Anyway, the point is it started out very, very cheap. It's gotten more expensive, and much more expensive in multiple ways. One is that now, by running a relational database, we do pay thousands of dollars a month. It is single-digit thousands, probably like mids. It depends. I'm looking at my graphs on the wall here. We scale, and Stefan's written about how he does this before, we scale the Azure SQL Hyperscale database based on load. And because we now do huge amounts of caching of data at Cloudflare, that load can be very, very low. But then we load a new data breach like yesterday, we have to flush all of that cache out, and suddenly all the traffic goes to the origin. So right now, looking at my big screen of Grafana graphs on the wall here, we are running at 32 cores. 32 cores is about the most we ever run it, but our database utilization is sitting at 16.5%, which means it's about to scale down. As time goes by and more data gets cached at Cloudflare, we will get down to 4 cores. So we will get down to 1/8 of what the cost is today. Or to put it another way, when we load a data breach, suddenly our database costs go up about 8 times. So our monthly cost is highly variable. If we load, let's say we loaded one data breach every 3 days, and then just as our load started to go down and caching was going up, well, then suddenly it would go back up again because we'd flush the cache. If we loaded 6 data breaches in one day, then nothing for the rest of the month, then our cost would actually be quite low because it would all flush out and that would become quite cheap. Or rather, it would all recache and become quite cheap. So it's highly variable. The other thing in terms of costs is there are lots of other ancillary things now that cost us money that didn't when I first started this. Lawyers is one. Now, it's not lawyers in a bad way. Very, very rare that we need a lawyer in a bad way. But it's more things like huge amounts of time and effort gone into privacy controls, documentation, things that you can see on the website, lots of other things behind the scenes that you can't see. Insurances, because you've got to have things like liability insurance or indemnification. If we get sued to wazoo because a company is very unhappy about the way we've categorized a data breach, we've got to have insurances for that. So a lot of our expenses these days are the other things behind the scenes that you don't see. Oh, and Stefan, we pay Stefan money. So there's that too. Yeah, employee contract, Stefan's got it. So I think, to go back to your original question, if you were going to start a Have I Been Pwned today, you could do exactly what I did 12 years ago, and it would still be a cup of coffee a day. If it grows into a massive thing with huge amounts of traffic and subscribers and dependencies, then it costs money, but then you have revenue as well. So suddenly the costing of the money is not so bad. I still think we can get our costs down a lot. Part of our problem is because there's only 3 of us, and things are just grown very organically. And as Steph and I were saying, we had a call just before this, it's like we just have so much stuff on our backlog that you very often don't spend time tuning things like cost. And particularly when you do have revenue to cover the costs, we've probably got all sorts of efficiencies we could find yet. Aaron, I bet the coffee machine costs a lot, didn't it? Well, okay, interesting question. I think I'm about to replace my coffee machine. I've had the same coffee machine for the last 10 years. I think it'll be 10 years next month. And I want something new, and it's not cheap, but it looks really cool. All right, let me look at the other questions here. Shashinto, to expand on my question, I have a WordPress site for many years. Recently I discovered I had the API enabled on it. Started to build a Blazor front end for it, reading posts and pages via API. Cool. The question is, should I even do it? Should the API be enabled, or is it unsafe? Well, again, you've got to clarify, what do you mean by unsafe? I cannot think of any way that you can consume Have I Been Pwned that I would categorize as unsafe. It's not unsafe in the way we handle the data or store the data or transit the data. So unless you can give me something a little bit more specific about what you mean by unsafe, I say it's safe. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah, so Stefan says data egress is expensive. One of the things about this service, which I did have from very early on, is we do get a lot of support from different organizations in different ways, and some of it's expertise and some of it is services. So that includes everything from Microsoft to Cloudflare to SendGrid to Stefan's doing a lot of really cool stuff with Honeycomb at the moment. We'll talk about Honeycomb in much more detail later on. And those organizations help us a lot in both those ways, giving us services. I mean, we've spoken many times about Cloudflare, for example, donates all of the services that run Pwn passwords. We do, let's check the stats today, but last time I looked, we did more than 16 billion queries a month on Pwn passwords, and we don't pay a cent for that. Now, we make it all free and open source and available to the community, and I was reading today, Cloudflare is worth like $75 billion or something like that. So they're doing good. And then they make those services, partly because they're doing good, they make those services available free to the community. So we don't have to pay for it, and everybody gets access to it. And we're very, very happy about it. Let's look, 30 days of Pwn passwords. Hey, we're at now at 17.7 billion. There you go. How's that, Stefan? We have passed 17 billion. And were it to be another few days before I looked at this, I suggest we would have passed 18 billion. So we did 677 million requests a few days ago in one day. 679 million on another day. Wow. In the not too distant future, we will have a billion request day. Damn, that's cool. That's really, really cool. Thank you, Cloudflare. Yeah, so we have support from organizations. The expertise as well makes a big difference. I mentioned Honeycomb before. We're getting some really, really good support from them, just from people, people within the circles that Stefan and I travel in, people that we know from lives before us using Honeycomb, which is really good. So, yeah. Yeah, so Stefan's saying it's an exponential trend upwards. I assume that's the Pwn passwords traffic. I wonder if there are any more sort of interesting referrers there. For the most part, we don't know who uses Pwn passwords. And we don't know because we have no authentication, we have no requirement to identify, we have no requirement for attribution. The only time we really get any idea is either when someone tells us or they've embedded the calls to the Pwn Passwords API client side and we get referrer headers. And that's what I'm looking at the moment. It's pretty much stuff that I've read out before. Our top referrers are 1Password, Opera, Telstra here in Australia, a big telco, Rushbet, Zipcar, the BBC, TradingView, Ramp, Hugging Face, and Meister.co. I don't think I've seen that one before. What do they do? Meister.co. Now, if these were customers who'd signed up for a subscription or something, we wouldn't be reading out their names. But if you embed calls to us in your website and anyone can hit F12 in the dev tools and see the requests, well, we are Meister. We believe great work doesn't need to be hard work. That's why simplicity is at the heart of everything we do. What do you do? Scale up. 41 million users, 52 million in funding. Simplicity, inclusion, customer empathy. But what do you do? Products. Okay. Product tour, security, digitization. Anyway, I'm sure they're very smart because they're using Have I Been Pwned and Pwn passwords. Aaron says, I had a cool idea about the voice AI thing you've been working with, Troy. I was thinking of an API that translated languages and apps like WhatsApp and Telegram. Could also read messages using AI. I think a lot of that's happening already. Aaron, I had to burst your bubble on that. Charlotte got some of the new AirPods the other day, AirPod Pros, and they're meant to do live translation. So I assume they listen and then translate limited set of languages. And I don't think it covers Norwegian, which is the one thing that she can actually test them with, but we'll see. Charlotte made me change the voice that I had, which was my voice. I had trained 11 labs to use my voice, so the house spoke like me. She thought that was too weird, and she wanted David Attenborough, which Stefan helped me do. So he had a very good prompt that could then train 11 labs to speak like David Attenborough. And then I used a slightly different prompt for someone at the door to explain it in a there's a difference between a Richard Attenborough and a David Attenborough, isn't there? Anyway, like an Attenborough. And and that was then the voice. And then that sounded really weird because it was just too it was fun, but then it was too wordy. So I gotta tweak that. Shushinta, the way I read your response, there is no known issue. Someone can take over my website easily by using the API. Unsafe for me means society. Okay, no one can take over your website using our API unless you're doing something really dumb with your website. You would literally have to have your website consume an external API that then contains content that would modify your website in a way it's not meant to. And if you're not sure about that, maybe stop using APIs. I think there's a different set of issues then. Stefan says, I made the same mix-up between the Attenboroughs. Which Attenboroughs are meant to be? Because you gave me one that said Richard, and it seemed to work quite well. But man, it's wordy. And the other thing is that when you... I'm going to fix it right now while I'm talking. When you ask the automation... So in fact, I've got it open right here. So my instructions are, look at the image and briefly describe how many people you see. This is for when someone rings the doorbell. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, no, I did change it because before it was like, explain it in the Richard Attenborough way. And now I've gone back to my original one, which says, this will be broadcast inside a house, so should be conversational, preferably summarized in a single sentence. But I just find the voice that 11 Labs generated with the prompt that you gave me, Stefan, it was funny the first few times. And now it's just getting annoying because it's just... I don't want a description of a nature scene, like I just want to know, is someone at the door to rob me? Or, oh, we did start actually having that chat. Someone was over the other day. I think we might have been drinking beer. And we said, because now the doorbell rings and it immediately starts describing who's at the door. And Charlotte hears this. So as she's walking towards the door, she knows what to expect. So this is our door. And then you go through and then there's another gate at the front. And we're like, we can just get it to say anything we want. Like we can get it to prompt and say, doorbell's just rung. There's a gang of youths outside the front door holding a chainsaw and a severed head. I just wonder how she reacts to that. That'd be funny. We'd do it for Halloween, except we're going to be in Europe for Halloween. Richard was in, so Joe says, Richard was in Jurassic Park. David does living animals. Well, they worked it out anyway. Huh. Richard Attenborough was in the Dino movie. That's the connection. That's funny. Yeah, Paul, I get that point about only talking about the WordPress website and not have a main point. Aaron is the one that says, here's Troy in his natural habitat. Yeah, David's the one we wanted. Regardless, I think it figured it out. And yeah, it's just a bit too wordy. But the problem is that you end up with one that either sounds too American, no offense to our American friends, I'm sure everything there is just fine at the moment, or it's like too formal British. There was an Australian one that was okay. Maybe we'll go back to that. What I found you can do, you can't sort of go in and, let's say the David Attenborough thing, you can't go to 11 Labs and say, just create a voice that sounds like David Attenborough, because there are obvious issues there in terms of the right to someone's voice. But what you can do is you can go to ChatGPT and you can say, give me a detailed description of what David Attenborough sounds like. And then you can take that and you go to 11 Labs and say, create a voice that sounds like this. And then you end up with something that's very close to it anyway. Shashinta needs an audiobook read by Troy. Any book will do. Get a custom Aussie accent again. Yeah, well, Alistair says, yeah, Croc Dundee or Yahoo Serious. Oh boy, there's Yahoo Serious. Yeah, maybe a bit of Mick Dundee. I could ask it that. I like that. I'll do that for next week. Moving on. Incidentally, my camera hasn't stopped once this week. Last week and the week before, I was having problems with the camera dropping out. So I've got a nice Sony, what is it, A6400 something camera, into an Elgato cam link into the back of the computer. I did two highly technical things. One of them was to unplug it from one USB port and plug it into the other USB port. That may be what fixed it. The other, which is a more likely explanation, is to set the USB port to not do any power management stuff. That seems like a more logical answer. So anyway, it's fine now, which is good, without any new hardware. 2 new data breaches this week, both French. The French ones have had a bit of a time of it recently. Someone sent me something else French today as well, and there's another French one that came in along with the other ones too. So seem to be some people wreaking havoc there. The first one here was from last month, and I'm going to butcher this name, but Bouygues Telecom, Bouygues, that's a telco. So they had an incident last month. The headlines were 6.4 million customers. The data had about 6.3 something million, so I assume it's referring to the row count, but only 5.7 million unique email addresses. Now, that also included names, physical addresses, phone numbers, dates of birth, and IBANs. Now, if you're not from Europe, where IBANs tend to be very prominent, IBAN is an international bank account number. They alone are not sufficient to take money out of your account, but they are the gateway to doing so. The IBAN is used in a lot of financial transactions. I assume that you could also very creatively use that in a social engineering attack as well. Knowing someone's bank account number is kind of handy to be, hey, I won't even give you ideas, but you know the sorts of ways it could be used. So that was there. A bunch of those folks were already in Have I Been Pwned as well. And then the one that we went in yesterday was Cultura. Cultura is a retailer. They attributed this to an external IT service provider. I couldn't find any references to which service provider it was, but that data breach had almost 1.5 million email addresses, names, phone numbers, physical addresses, and orders that people had made. And that goes back to September last year, but that is just a piece of data that has only just popped up today, or rather yesterday, when it have been pwned. Let's have a look at the comments here. Aaron says, there have really been no data breaches. There has been a week with 0. Well, yeah, spoke too soon. Keep in mind too that, a data breach happens, and then a period of time passes until anyone other than the person responsible for it finds out about it. And then a period of time passes before it's in the press or it's disclosed to the organization. And then a period of time passes before it ends up in some degree of circulation. And then a period of time passes before it ends up in my inbox. So that can all compress into the space of hours. It can expand into the space of years. Dropbox and LinkedIn, both 2012 data breaches, and I didn't see that data until 2016. This one here I've just spoken about, Cultura, September last year. I don't know how many other people had it before then. Many of these do appear on hacking forums, very often for sale. They're given to another party. I guess they get monetized to some extent, and then they just get discarded and circulated. So you never quite know, but I guess my point is that what you see me talking about being in Have I Been Pwned each week is not necessarily reflective of what has happened each week. And of course, there are many, 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 many incidents that never end up in Have I Been Pwned for one reason or another. Now, see if anyone has a tip on this. I do have a very large set of StealerLog data I'm parsing at the moment. It has been made available to me via rsync. Now, I have not used rsync much in the past. I'm sure I have a little bit. I am mostly Windows top to bottom. I do have things like Synology NAS, which is currently pulling this down via SSH. And The problem that I'm having, and even ChatGPT can't figure this out, this file is many terabytes and I cannot download it faster than about 9.8 megabytes a second. And my ETA at the moment is 63 hours. Now, yep, Aaron, I know rsync is very, very powerful. No matter how I've tried to do it, either via an SFTP client from my Windows box or SSH'd into my Synology NAS, I cannot get it down faster than about 10 megabytes a second. My connection should easily support 10 times that. Now, in a way, it kind of doesn't matter because I've got about 2 days before I go away to Sydney for that trip I mentioned earlier. And this will just finish while I'm away. But I'd like to know why, because this bugs me. It should be going much, much faster. And every suggestion I can find online really hasn't helped, short of me starting to invest time I don't have to try and fix something to finish earlier so that I can process it in time I don't have anyway. Because if it finishes while I'm away, then it's fine. Alice says with SSH you can reduce the complexity of the algo, which can help. Aaron says rsync can push a file and pick it up if the connection is dropped. Yep, aware of that. Yep. Yeah. So Stefan WSL, was that in response to my rsync discussion? Because I'm about to wrap this up, drop me a Slack message if you have a good solution for this. But yeah, it's kind of annoying. And the other good thing, so we have a 1 gigabit connection here, which by Australian standards is really good. And that's about to be doubled to 2 gigabit. So when I get back from this trip, they're coming in to upgrade the box, and for like another $30 a month or something, I get 2 gigabit, which would be fantastic. But 2 gigabit ain't great if I'm still limited to 10 megabytes a second by something like rsync. Now, Joe said, is it possible they're rate limiting? That was my initial thought. I got in touch with the provider and they came back and assured me they're not rate limiting and gave me a bunch of suggestions, none of which have helped. So yeah, that was my first thought as well. But apparently no. Oh, Scott's here just in time. I'm just wrapping up, mate. Oh yeah, I got to contact you to talk about our December plans. I'll do that after this. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap that up. Scott, I'll drop you a message, mate, and I'm going to do this again in 8 days from now after I get back from that Sydney trip. Thanks, folks. See you later.